freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 314 of Gun Freedom Radio, where we engage, we educate, and we inform. We are brought to you by AZ Firearms Auctions, where you set the price. We are your nationwide premier gun and firearm and ammo auction house. I am one of your hosts, Cheryl Todd.
And I'm the other guy, Dan Todd. We have a great show today. Our theme is correcting the language, and our guest is Ashley Hlebinsky. Ashley is one of the nation's foremost authorities on firearms history. Recently, she served as both curator of the Cody Firearms Museum and project director for the museum's multi-million-dollar renovation that opened in July of 2019. Due to her and her team's efforts, the museum has received positive reviews from both gun and mainstream media and is seen as the premier gun museum in the world that fosters dialogue for a range of diverse audiences.
Additionally, Hlebinsky is a highly sought after museum consultant, guest speaker, writer, and expert witness in the United States and Canada. And in her spare time, she is a television host and producer. Welcome back to the show, Miss Ashley.
Thanks for having me.
This is awesome. It's always great to catch up and chat with you. We all live in Arizona, and yet we rarely get time to see each other because a lot of times you're just out and about traveling the country.
I've been traveling a lot. Like this past month and a half, I think I've been gone most of the weeks. I go for like really short stints. So Marley and I were in Cincinnati, Montana. I was supposed to be back in Cincinnati this week, but couldn't make that happen going to Cody. So, and Washington, D.C. Yes.
Oh,
yeah. I snuck that in there.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. And so in our intro, we mentioned that you are an expert witness and you recently offered testimony as a subject matter expert to the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution. I said that all in one breath.
Yeah.
And in a hearing titled Stop the Gun Violence, Ghost Guns. But you don't use that term, and you told the Senate as much. And I love what you said to them. Can you expound on that here for our audience?
Yeah. So to give you a little perspective on this type of testimony, because it's real different than being in a courtroom. And so I submitted a 20-page report Monday morning before the hearing. And you don't have to submit a 20-page report, but there's so much to the history that I wanted to make sure it was put somewhere. And I do know for a fact that multiple senators read it, and I can talk about that in a second. But then you have a 5-minute oral testimony. And so you kind of have to get out the highlights, which for me, real difficult. But the first thing I wanted to address is something that I address a lot with the media or really any type of public forum, especially when you've got non-gun people in the audience, and even with gun people, because I can get on them too about some of the words we use. Because what people don't realize is when you're trying to pass legislation or do something that's incredibly complicated, you've got to basically put together something that will help people understand what you're trying to do, which is understandable. And that is something we do in the museum world. When you're writing a panel, you've got like your title, your subtitle, and then the actual content that most people don't read. But the problem that happens is in order to get a lot of people to support it, a lot of times you have to use words that are intentionally political, intentionally inflammatory. And the thing I always tell my friends who are pro gun control, which I know, but I work in academia, is we've had lots of conversations recently where they'll say, well, I think assault weapons should be banned. And I work on assault weapons ban cases, the one in California. And I'm like, you do realize that that doesn't actually ban anything. And I go into the explanation of just the convoluted weirdness that some of these laws have in them. And the same thing I said about the quote unquote ghost guns or privately made firearms is the fact that when you look at the ATF's proposed amendments, which came out the Friday before, and I think I was the only witness who had read them, other than Richard Vasquez on the Republican side, when you look at that, it's not doing what people think it's doing. And so at the end of my testimony, my general point was, as a historian, I don't really care what you want, but if you're saying you want this and you're doing something else, you're either just ignorant or you're doing it intentionally. And the last, statement of my report was that you're basically letting your constituency down who thinks you're doing this, and then also providing them a false sense of security when, you're ultimately not doing any of the things that you're saying you're doing, and you don't have the research to back it up. And so that was kind of the beginning thing and the ending thing, because it's just, the terminology is so complicated in general. And then when you intentionally give it a marketing slogan, which is what it is, it infers that you're doing something along the lines of what the slogan says. And that's just not always the case, whether it's real marketing or political marketing.
Boy, that is the truth. And so I love how you set the tone early on, and you said that you're not going to use the term ghost gun. So they can call their committee, the committee of, doing away with ghost guns, but you said, I'm not going to, play into that. And there are very good reasons for that. And that's why I titled our conversation here with you today called Correcting the Language. And so, you said it was a rhetorical tool, the language ghost guns, in that it gave a false sense of authority on the subject. And so you said, don't conflate this idea that it's something invisible. I mean, can you kind of expound? I'm sure you're going to do a much better job of this than I'm doing.
Yeah. So I can get into the whole what is a quote unquote ghost gun, because there's definitions for what they're trying to say it is and is not. But the problem is that they as in politicians like interchange the terminology, so they don't ultimately say what they're trying to say. But the one thing that I joked to Mark while I was writing my written testimony was the fact that I was like, I'm not gonna lie, when I first heard the term ghost gun years ago, I don't even remember who coined it, but when I first heard the term ghost gun, I was like, oh, something that can evade a security scanner. I mean, that to me makes way more sense than anything else. And so when you use the term ghost guns, when you use that term, I think anytime you use a rhetorical term, it makes people think they know more about it than they do, but then it also potentially misleads what it is doing. So, I mean, I first heard it years ago and was like, it's some Bruce Willis shit, right? And so, that's what my brain goes to when I hear that term. And so it's open-ended enough that you can kind of draw your own conclusions and then think you're really understanding what's happening, and you're not. And so it seems to be happening a lot. And with the quote unquote ghost gun, I think I'm now using the term far more than I did in the Senate. When you use that term, what they're actually referring to is what a lot of people know as the 80% lower. That's not the ATF terminology, but it's just something that the industry has used. So if you're going to buy a lower and I'm going to quote completely done, because it's not actually completely done. But if you're going to buy one that's got most of the machined parts, all of that done, that is serialized and that is subject to a background check no matter where you purchase it. The 80% is basically like a block where you have to do a lot more assembly to it. And that is something that's not serialized. However, it does take effort in order to do it. Just because you can get a kit that kind of helps you do it doesn't mean it's going to operate. And so what happens a lot is these, I'm going to use 100% and 80% because it just makes sense, even though 100% is still not 100%. But sure, the 100% serialized background check, the 80% is not. And that's where they use only 20%, and that kind of thing. But the problem is, I think a lot of times when politicians are talking about it, they think they're they interchange 180%, and they're not really quite understanding that those are very different things and require, a different process. And so that's where the conflation of the terms comes in a lot, because they're not using those words precisely. And so it is causing a lot of confusion, even if you're a little bit more aware of what they're trying to talk about. I mean, it's incredibly confusing. I had to sit there with both of them in front of me when I was writing my report to make sure I was getting it all right.
Well, for sure. And, when you say that politicians tend to conflate terms, and when you conflate, you confuse. And I think a lot of times it's purposeful, but even just, when they want to use the word automatic guns, when they very clearly mean a semi-automatic gun, uh, that's the difference of night and day. Because obviously, a semi-automatic, well, I don't know if it's obvious, maybe not everybody knows. It's a 1-for-1 ratio. You pull the trigger, one projectile comes out. That's semi-auto. And an automatic gun is one pull of the trigger, every projectile that's in the magazine or the clip. Well, okay, now I've confused people with clips. But anyway, will continue on out of the firearm. And so then with this ghost gun thing, and we're talking about lowers. So Dan, you haven't said much, and I know you know a lot about this topic. What's a lower?
The lower receiver on a M16 or AR-15 or M16. But where I'm confused at, Ashley.
Right, but that's where the magazine.
Yes, the magazine goes. It's where the trigger mechanism is and stuff. You can't operate the gun without it.
Yes.
But where I'm confused is, Ashley, is that if they say that 80% receiver is going to be now a firearm, then a pipe from a hardware store is a bomb. It's no different, because you can't take this 80% receiver and just put it on a gun and it works. You've got to go through intensive milling and drilling and fitting the gun to fit. You have to be somewhat an expert on it to do it right. And a pipe that you put on your plumbing in your house, if it has two ends, you put a cap at each end, and now it's a bomb. How is that any different?
Where does it end?
Where does it end? Right.
Well, and to understand what the politicians, and I have not read what Senator Blumenthal is putting out on the Untraceable Firearms Act or something that he said at the beginning. But if you look at the ATF amendment, it's not actually like banning ghost guns. It's a lot more focused on, they're saying that a low receiver doesn't necessarily meet the original definition of, firearm. And so there's a couple of things in that I won't get too confused. But the interesting thing is that the ATF proposal isn't necessarily banning any of those things. It's regulating the transfer of those firearms more so. So one, they're trying to figure out what needs to be serialized, and it's incredibly confusing when you read it. And then there are also most of the laws, or the proposed amendment, it does define what a gunsmith could be in terms of transfer information, but then it's about transfer markings. And so you can still acquire these certain things if they can figure out what's a gun and what's not. But you can still acquire these things, assemble them. And if you're not going to ever transfer it to somebody, it doesn't need these markings. So, again, criminals are probably not going to you're not going to transfer a gun to a criminal knowingly, and then going through that process. And so it's just so confusing what the proposed amendment says it's doing. And then it's also becoming a lot more generic in its terminology. So when you read what they're defining as firearm and these other things, they're basically, and I said this in the Senate, they're taking the power out of Congress to determine what these things are and what they aren't. And they're giving it to the director of the ATF. So they're making the terms a lot more generic, because they're like, well, there's so many different types, and they're not wrong in that. But by doing that, they're saying, well, let's just keep it open-ended. And then the ATF director can make that call when it comes across the table, which is very odd. And they've already done that to some extent. I can't remember which FN it was, but they've already done that to some extent, where on the last iteration of the terminology, where the ATF director arbitrarily decided, this piece was a firearm on this specific FN gun. And so it leaves it too open-ended, and it puts too much power into the hands of one person to make that call.
An unelected person besides, right?
That is the scary part, because you can talk to 5 different ATF agents and they'll all give you a different definition of a ruling,
Mhm.
and those rulings are treated them like they're laws.
Yeah.
And that is the scary part when we get an audit. I've had several times where I was threatened that what you did here was wrong, and then they go back and the next day say, no, you're okay with that.
Mhm.
But it's that if you get, they just, these rulings are scary because they're not law, they're definitions.
Right.
And so I'm scared. We already have a law. If you make a gun, you're supposed to put a serial number on it,
Right.
right? If you make a gun, it has to be serialized. Is that correct? Or
I mean, I'm not sure 100% with, with the downloading guns, because if you have 80% and you do assemble it and you're not transferring it, it doesn't need a serial number if it belongs to you. And then I'm not 100% sure. FPCs knows this. I think the big difference between the original definitions and the proposed amendment is the transfer marking requirement. I do not quote me on this, but I feel like when I was talking to FPC right before this, that right now to transfer one that you assemble doesn't necessarily need a serial number.
you're probably right
And
on
that's
that.
the big difference. But if
Because-
it's my understanding, if you 3D print or whatever, because that didn't come up a lot in the
Right.
testimonies, 3D printing's involved in this as well. And if you get the 80% and you assemble it, it doesn't need to be serialized.
As a manufacturer, I have a license to manufacture a gun. If I make a gun, I have to put a serial number on it.
But you're a manufacturer.
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
difference.
But as an
Yeah.
individual, I think you're right. But we've had several guns come into our store that people sold us that didn't have a serial number on it because they made the gun and we had to destroy the receiver.
Mhm.
So
And that actually is a part of the proposed amendment as well, the destruction of the receivers. And when that's a firearm, and then if it's destroyed to this spec, then it's not, it's just a lot. It's like, it's over 100 pages. And it came out Friday night. I found out I was it came out Friday. I found out I was testifying Friday afternoon. And I tried to go through it as quickly as possible so that I could include that in my testimony. It wasn't a requirement, but I wanted to make sure that,
Mhm.
I knew what was on the table when I went on Tuesday. And I can't speak to the preparation that the other witnesses had, but it seemed like a lot of them hadn't read the proposed amendments yet,
Mhm.
which, I mean, Friday night
Yeah.
to Tuesday, if they didn't know they were testifying, although I'm pretty sure Richard Vasquez and I were the only ones that found out last minute that we were going, because that's just how whatever party is in control and that type of hearing, they kind of set the meeting, the schedule, and so it's reactionary. So it's like that whoever's in control, it's reactionary for the other side of witnesses.
Yeah.
Richard Vasquez is probably one of the most knowledgeable gun people I know on the law side of it.
Mhm. No,
You
he was a
on the
good-
you on the guns, but him on the law side. So it's a good partner to have with you. Ever since I heard you were coming on the air today, I was all excited to ask, is the Cody Museum going to have a ghost gun display?
Well, I'm not the curator, so that's not
I
my
know,
call.
I know, but-
We do currently have 3D printed firearms in the collection, and I mean, if you're being fair, there's a lot of really old guns that don't have serial numbers on
Right.
it. But I mean, we do interpret that. Whether or not the modern terminology of ghost guns will get incorporated into, because as we have a panel about assault weapons, assault rifles, and modern sporting rifles. Oh my God. If I haven't said that word in so long, that term in so long. So, I mean, would that get incorporated at some point? And probably, but it's just kind of too new to see. But we do have the 3D printed guns, and that was an interesting ordeal too, because we didn't print them, so we had Control Pew print them for us and legally get them into our possession. But that was a whole conversation, and we actually called the ATF about it, because we have a Liberator that's the fully assembled 3D printed gun, and there's requirements for moving that around and different things. So we had to call them because everyone was just trying to make sure it was being transferred. So it was really confusing. So would we do one specifically on unserialized firearms? That's a Danny call for the temporary exhibit. Would we ultimately incorporate the terminology into the museum so people had a comparison of what's being talked about? Probably, but time will tell.
Well, and
Yes.
at Halloween time, you could just have an empty case and put, this is a ghost gun.
Yeah, there you
Oh,
go.
that's true. We wanted to do years ago. We wanted to do Franken guns for Halloween, which are guns, historic guns that are like they're the historic gun, but they're assembled from all different guns to make one gun.
I
We
made
have
a,
several of those in the collection.
I made a
Yeah.
Stin gun. I still have it. It's called a Frankenstein.
Everything.
All pieces of
I like
guns
it.
that I put together.
That's
So
very cool. Well, when we are educated, intelligent people who we've done some measure of this for a living for multiple years. And we still struggle with trying to make it make sense in a small amount of words and a small amount of time.
Well, and we still try to make sense of the definitions ourselves.
it's
Exactly.
hard.
And I
Yeah.
think it's maybe why the founders put the words shall not be infringed in the in the Second Amendment. Because they're like, yeah, but what if somebody, and they're like, no, just shall not be infringed. Well, how about if this thing, no, just shall not be infringed. And it would be so much simpler and so much easier because, as we all know, the bad guys that really intend to do harm, that don't have any value over their fellow man and human life. I don't think they're sitting around reading all the regulations and the statutes and the laws, trying to make sure they're on the right side of the law before they go break the law. But that's just me.
Well, and one of the things that I brought up in the testimony, well, not in my testimony, but in the question and answer portion, was the fact of, I said marketing slogan, because that was one of the things that kept coming up with the other witnesses, is they kept saying, well, this is how the gun industry markets it. This is how the gun industry markets it. And like, just a little sidebar, we screw ourselves over all the time with that. Like, like you look at stuff all the time and you're just like, this is going to end so badly. And the example that I used was Hiram Percy Maxim and his silencer, and he came up with that. It was brilliant marketing. It was the name of his invention, and now it's very confusing for people, but it's why I said multiple times, marketing is not reality. And it's, I almost said like the gun industry shoots itself in the foot, but I feel like that's, but it's true. I mean, I always joke that, that like some executives, when you hear terms get turned around from the gun world to the media world, like a bunch of guys 20 years ago were sitting in a room and they were like, oh, we're calling it this. This is going to be awesome. And then 20 years later, everyone's like, we didn't call it that. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, it drives me nuts when we call a firearm a weapon.
Yeah.
I don't like calling a firearm a weapon. I think that it's a tool, a weapon. When they use it against me, now that is a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
But not when I own it. I'm not
as
using
a
it for a
defensive
weapon.
tool or a tool of hunting.
But I'm just a guy that doesn't know much.
But
so.
no, you're so right that we think it sounds cool on our side of the fence to say assault rifle, right? And then we realize we are, handing the other side, something that they are using to scare the public about us, to scare them that we're, bad people or dangerous people. And so when I look at, flash forward, because you're a historian and you've looked all the way back, not that you have a crystal ball to look forward, but how do you think that that's ultimately going to play out? Because the conflation is confusing. Trying to disentangle it is confusing. I think that it can't lead anywhere really good. And maybe we can learn from that and stop using these kind of terms. What do you think?
I think this is my Ashley opinion, not necessarily a historical opinion, but in terms of marketing, I mean, marketing slogans, they come and go in popularity and in terms of political correctness. For example, Smith & Wesson's advertising to women at the turn of the 20th century was very like, little lady, like you can protect yourself with this thing. And then they tried to do it again in the 1980s and it did not sit. They were able to advertise in Ladies Home Journal and all these things. And the similar type of rhetoric they were using back then to sell something in the 1980s didn't fly. And that caused a bit of an issue in terms of being allowed to continue to be marketed in these things. So, I mean, like that, we kind of have to be more aware when we're making them. But to be perfectly honest, I think it's a culture thing. So if it's something that's acceptable in grander culture and not as controversial, then I think they can get away with a lot more marketing issues and questionable marketing choices than something that is political and controversial. And we've seen that with everything else today, with all the different companies that have advertised one way for 100 years, and now they're realizing maybe whether you agree with it or not, maybe we should update our marketing terms. And so I think when you get something that's as political right now as firearms, it's going to be much more under a microscope. But we already know that this is a tool for lawsuits, because marketing slogans get brought in all the time into lawsuits. When I work on the Ruger cases with the Colt type single actions, it comes up all the time. Well, does Ruger market their old model, which they don't anymore because they don't sell it, but did they market their old model as a 6-shooter? And that's because the old model needed to be loaded with 5 rounds and the hammer on an empty chamber. And that's just something that's known within the gun community, and it's in their, their instruction manual, is that this is how you handle it appropriately. But that comes into the other side, which is that they market it as a 6-shooter, not a 5-shooter. And so that type of thing pops up all the time with anything. And I think if I remember correctly, the Sandy Hook shooting is currently, there's a lawsuit that brings in the marketing. So, it is what it is. You can't win. And so you just kind of have to know what your clientele will purchase. And I assume nowadays, this is a total assumption, but I'm sure if you're trying to come up with a new marketing slogan or name, you've got lots of lawyers now in those companies that can probably try to
Well,
I would think so.
I got an idea.
We can't use that word.
I got an idea.
And that word either.
I got an idea.
What's that?
It's a new rifle I'm going to make. It's
Okay.
called the Unicorn 15. It shoots rainbow colored tracers.
Nice.
No?
Oh man.
Range 702 in Las Vegas actually has a unicorn gun, and it's awesome.
Oh, well, there
Okay,
you
well,
go. Somebody
there-
beat you to
well,
the unicorn.
I'm just a little late with that. I'll
It's
think of
really
something.
cool. If you go to
Very
my
fast.
Instagram, you can see Marley, because they've got unicorn sparkly, like a unicorn ear protection, and the gun in front of him. So Marley's modeling the ear pro.
Oh, nice.
And it's really cool. I think if I remember correctly, it was done for like a bachelor party as a joke, and now everybody wants to. Oh no, wait. It might have been the woman's kids, like they put it together as like a, for like a kid's party, like her daughter or something. And then like all of a sudden it became this bachelor party joke. So it's still there. You can shoot it. You can have the ear pro. It's the unicorn gun, and it's awesome.
Oh,
Awesome.
I love it. So you've mentioned Marley a couple of times, and you mentioned Mark one time. So Mark Hainish is your husband,
Yes.
and he's in this industry as well. What is he doing these days?
Oh gosh, he's president of sales for Ammo Incorporated, which is out of Arizona, and it is public information that they've just acquired Gunbroker. So
Yes.
that company
Wow.
went from like little boutique ammo company to now they own Gunbroker.
Oh my gosh.
That's crazy. That's awesome.
That
Well,
didn't get any media attention, by the way, from the gun industry. Like I was really disappointed.
I know. I'm behind the 8 ball on that. I've got to have him on because that is huge
Yeah.
news.
Yeah.
That is awesome. news.
And the ammo business is in such a interesting position. So even that right there is something to bring him on and talk about.
Yeah, no, that's all been, I love reading all the like conspiracy theories about where all the ammo is.
Must be with the unicorns. And so
Yep, it's hanging out with unicorns.
yeah. And Marley, you've been working with Marley a lot. I see on your, I think it's your Instagram. I see a lot that you're really working hard to train him. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah,
Well, wait,
let me see.
what is
He's
Marley
sleeping at
first?
my feet right now.
Okay. All right. 'cause-
Marley's a puppy dog.
Okay. All right. Well,
Oh yeah, Marley's my service dog.
dog.
So let me see if hey Marty's, can you wake up? Hi, can you come up? Can I cover? Can you cover? And he's like, screw you. Hey, come here, Marty. He's asleep. Sorry.
That's
Hey, Bubba.
okay.
Marty, come here.
Caught him off guard.
I know. Hey,
It's like, I'm not training right
Come
now.
Come
I'm
on.
napping.
let's touch. Come on. He's looking at me like it's not happening. So, and now he's laying down. I
No
apologize.
worries.
You can see my cute skirt.
Yes, I love it.
So Marley's my service dog. He just went swimming, so he's a little tired. So yeah, Marley's been working for like 9 months now. I'm looking at a year. He's a rescue that when we got him, he was considered unadoptable. And we weren't sure if he had the temperament to be a service dog. I'd been looking at getting a service dog for a long time now, major medical issues. And so I was like, well, he's smart enough, but temperament wise, we just weren't sure. So we worked on his obedience and then found out that he had bad hips. So he needed hip surgery. So we weren't even sure health wise if it was going to be a go. And so we got a service dog trainer last summer, and she, ironically, she lives down the street and she's one of 6 internationally certified service dog trainers in the world. There's no certification in the United States. So if someone ever says my dog's a certified service dog, that's not a thing. You can take them and get them a test, but it's not recognized by the ADA. So some, training programs will have an internal test just to see where your dog's at, but it's not a requirement in the US. But internationally, sometimes it is a requirement. They have a much higher standard for what is what they call an assistance dog. So she's trained internationally to do all that. So she helped him with strength conditioning. So we used to go up and down the stairs 30 times a day, swimming, stretching. And so she ultimately gave him, a clean bill of health in order to be working. And so he's been working for almost a year now as my service dog. He's task trained. He's learning a new thing, which I'm really excited about. He's actually, I'm just talking about my dog and service animals, but when you teach a service animal certain things, they go off of triggers. So like if you tap your foot leading up to a panic attack, or you start to pick at your hands, they learn, like, you do this, and then they learn to, knock your hands out of the way and to start alerting you before you have a medical incident. Well, one of the things that, if you're familiar with diabetic alert dogs, is they sniff blood. They sniff the blood levels. And so he's actually learning to sniff cortisol changes in my blood. And so I'm really excited about that, because then, it's not always a have to read the room kind of thing. And so he's learning that. And I think that's really neat. And so he'll learn different reactions for different situations. Awesome. So he's got the tasks of, touch, cover, hug. He also knows paw, because he learned touch before paw, because when he was strength conditioning. And so he's got all of those. And so now when he starts realizing the different levels in the blood, he'll use a different task for each of those to alert the severity of the situation, which is really cool. So who knew?
Just kind of like in pheromones or something, he can just kind of smell what's going on with your body.
Yeah. So what I keep joking about, though, is if a dog's a diabetic alert dog, they can read other people's bloods. Like, they'll alert if somebody's, blood sugar's low. Well, with cortisol, it's a lot to do with stress. And so I'm like, with the pandemic and everyone, we're going to be walking through the airport and he's going to be like, hey, hey.
True. Well,
but no, he's been great. I love it.
Your new profile picture you sent me for your guest page includes Marley. And so I thought this is perfect to be able to talk to people about who Marley is and why he's so important in this journey that you two have been on together. And people out there that are being told things like, oh, this dog is untrainable, unadoptable, whatever. Now, you don't want to be foolish and bring a dog that doesn't interact with children well, or something like that.
As a therapy dog at a hospital,
Remember when we got married, your parents said that I wasn't trainable? And
true story.
And you made it right?
That's a whole different topic. But I remember that one of his big outings, Marley's big outings, was actually coming out to our gun shop.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
In his training. And I just felt like that was such an honor for us, because it's important for other people too to understand that it's like, oh, he's so cute and you just want to love on him and stuff. But that is not appropriate, especially when a dog is training and when a dog is working, right?
Well, and the other thing that cracks me up, I've learned so much, since I used to be in a wheelchair. I've had over 10 surgeries. I've got a couple of other things that he's working with. But what's so interesting to me is how many people are like, so what's he do? What's wrong with you? And I'm like, hi, my name's Ashley. Maybe you should learn my first name before prying into my medical records. Yeah. But it's so true. So I always warn people, I'm like, because it doesn't seem like a rude question. A lot of people don't think of it that way, but it is like, it's like going up to someone in a wheelchair and being like, how'd that happen? Don't ask, especially, mind your own business. If your dog is clearly trained, it's not your business if you don't, to say that this person needs one or not. Most of the trainers with Dog Trainer US, if you're looking in an Arizona area, they do regular obedience training as well. They're amazing. They're so good. There's a fee for the life of the dog. It's unlimited private lessons, unlimited group classes. We go to 3 to 4 group classes a week. Both in with dogs that are just obedience trained and also public access. And so it's just a lot of them, you look at them and there's people in our class and I don't know what's wrong with any of these people in our class. And, I've been working with them for, a year, and it's because you just don't ask. But if you look at most of them, they're young. They don't look like, it's something that they would need, I guess, is that, super rude, I'm sure. And so it's just interesting to me because people do ask the weirdest questions. And what people don't also realize is that a lot of times service animals are there to mitigate the need for, greater medication. So some people are able to not be medicated at all with certain things with a service dog. Some people still need the medication, but maybe they don't have to take as much of it. And so it's, it's a choice that you can make if you are someone who's suffering from a disability. And, if it's not always the right thing for you, because it's like having a toddler around all the time.
Yeah.
You got to bring their poop bag and their food, and you're always, if you're traveling with them, and Marley's a little bit of a world traveler. And so it's been a really big learning curve for me, and I'm glad I did it. And he's helped me tremendously, especially on the big, long trips that I take. And yeah, I'm thrilled with it. And he gets to be a dog. I always hear that. He needs to be a dog. Trust me, he's more of a dog than most dogs.
Well, and he, not he necessarily, but there are going to be, I think, so many people out there, maybe especially young people, who are going to be dealing with agoraphobia, like fear of leaving the house because of all the COVID stuff. And to have, a companion dog, a service dog, a well-trained dog that knows how to help you move forward from there, that could actually be a whole new industry right there in of itself.
Yeah, it's interesting the different things that the dogs can do. And I think a lot of people just aren't aware that this is an option for them. And it's a lot of work. And if you're just buying a service dog outright, I mean, it's $25,000, $30,000. Marley's not board and trained as a service dog, although Dog Trainer does do that. I don't know what their fees are. But if you watch, there's a documentary called To Be of Service on Netflix, which is about veterans with PTSD. And then they actually get a prescription through the VA so that it's paid for. So they don't have to obviously pay that kind of price. But the thing about it is, you can pay all that money for a service dog, and if you don't work the dog, like doing training stuff, it'll go back to being, not an untrained dog, but less trained dog. And so it's a lot of effort, and that's why it's not for everybody. But I think a lot of people don't realize that it's, it is an option if it's the right option for you.
For sure. Wow. That was awesome. I didn't realize we were going to get that deep into Marley's history, but I am glad we did. No. I am glad we did.
Well, you don't see Ashley without seeing her puppy.
That's true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
And now it'll make more sense to people, and they'll know, don't ask stupid questions.
I'm more open about talking about it than other people, but it is funny to me. I've actually gotten, like, when I was in Cody last year, I got, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, I mean, you're not supposed to ask. And he's like, "Oh, sorry. But like, what's wrong with you?" And my answer nowadays is like, so much.
So much, right?
So much.
Like, how much
You
time
want
do
to
you
go
have?
down that rabbit hole, okay?
Right? It's like, do you want it alphabetized? Like, but it's becoming more acceptable nowadays to ask people about their medical history, like,
I guess you're right.
and all that kind of stuff. Have you had COVID? And so it's like, let's dial back from that, and let's respect people's privacy once again. Okay, last question, and we've got to let you get back to loving on your pup there. You do occupy a very unique space in this whole world of Second Amendment and firearms history, and being an expert witness, because you are very purposeful about being agnostic politically.
Mhm.
You're very careful, like in past shows when we've had you on and stuff. And maybe if I start just talking away, you'll bring me back to, okay, but I'm not political, and I don't speak on the political topics. And I respect that so much about you. You're so good about the way you do it. I never feel, pushed back or admonished. You're just reminding me and setting that boundary. That's so important. But at the same time, the Second Amendment has become this political football between the two major parties. So, I mean, how do you manage to stay in that neutral space, especially right now when
Yeah.
everything seems so divided and so political and so divisive?
Um, well, I mean, obviously nobody's completely objective and, everyone's a little biased. You just have to work really hard to try to kind of weed through it all and make that call. Um, it's difficult because you certainly have personal opinions. And if you watched my testimony, you know that my personal opinions were asked of me and I did not provide them at the testimony. But, honestly, I just try to find the common ground. So if I'm talking to someone that's, a gun owner that, starts in on, I don't even want to say it, but like, really like derogatory terminology about the other side, then I try to pull in something they don't know and be like, well, did you know that you used to be able to take a gun class at Berkeley? Did you know that, there was this huge group of armed feminists in the 60s? So I try to pull something that like isn't what they think. And then the other side, you can actually do it for feminists today and be like, well, did you know that the second wave of feminists, like a lot of them chose to arm themselves? So I try to do that when you get someone that, is kind of set in their ways on either side. And then I will say that, like, well, one, I don't follow politicians. So, like, I don't really know a lot of who people are. And I know that there's a lot of hatred of Senator Blumenthal, but I think this is a good indication of what I am doing and the fact that it is being successful. Everyone saw the back and forth with us, and a lot of people tried to say some pretty nasty things about him, although I loved it. And I was so glad he asked me questions. But he was the only politician in the room who went out of his way to speak to me beforehand, and tell me how much he appreciated my report. And that's how I said, that's how I know some people read it, because he actually talked to me about it. And then afterwards he went out of his way to come and talk to me again. And so, did I change his opinion? No. But what I did, and if you read my report and if you read my testimony and really listen to it, it is saying this is about, doing what you say you're doing and not letting your constituency down. So if you are for banning ghost guns, whatever that means, make sure that that's what you're doing, and don't lie about it. And the other side. And so I saw the fact that he took the time twice, and he did not have to. Nobody else approached me. There were 3 Republicans in the room to start. Nobody else approached me and took the time to actually talk to me about my research. I think that is a great illustration that, even though it's clear that I own firearms and I have my own personal opinions, that my report was something that they could also take something from it. And so that was awesome to me. Like, I really appreciated it, and I appreciated his time. Don't have to agree with
Ashley,
him, but appreciate his time.
I don't know if I
Absolutely.
agree with you on that. Okay. He
He didn't either,
well,
apparently.
no. The fact is that he listened to you before the meeting.
Mhm.
He listened to you after the meeting, and you said you didn't change his opinion. You did, because I would believe that at night when he's thinking about this, he's at least listening to what you had to say.
Hmm.
He valued you enough to listen, and maybe it
That's
didn't
true.
change 100%, but you put a seed in him,
Yeah.
and that's what we need to do. If I go to somebody that I don't like, and let's just say I go to a politician I don't like, and they're willing to talk to me, if I cut them short, I've earned nothing.
Mhm.
I've gained nothing.
Mhm.
But if I talk
Mhm.
to them and tell them how I feel without being critical to them, and just just being honest, then I hope that I at least planted a seed,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So
And I actually appreciate you saying that, because I didn't think that was where it was going, but
Yeah.
but I really appreciate that, because that was I hope so. I mean, one of the goals that I had said before the hearing is I consider the hearing to have been a complete win if I get a business card of someone who doesn't agree with me.
Right.
And I did get Attorney General Josh Shapiro's business card on his way out. We spoke beforehand as well. And I've always just tried to be like, look, I can vehemently disagree with you. We don't have to share any common ground, but we don't have to be nasty.
Yes.
And so to me, it really comes down to the question of, are you unaware that these things are, not great? And do you want to call me and actually ask ask what could be done, better in the wording? Or do you know what you're doing and you don't care either way? And for me, maybe this is naive. Listen, if that's your shtick, that's your shtick, but be honest about it. And so that was really for me, I'm sure that they'll take away new information. Whether or not that ultimately matters, though, it will be interesting. And I think time will tell on that.
It does help. I remember having arguments with people when I was younger and more stupid, that, if they yell at you, then all you're going to do is go home and think about how stupid they are.
How mean
But
they were,
what if a
you're not
guy
gonna
throws
consider
some
their
common
ideas.
sense, something at him that he believes in, and you actually have conversation about it, then you're going to think about that later on, and it may change you and you don't even know it, that it makes changes to you. So I'm really excited that he talked to you before and after, because that's a
And I got some
perfect
elbow bumps out of it.
Yeah, right.
Well,
right,
then
yeah.
that's awesome.
I was laughing. I thought that was just a myth, but everyone was bumping my elbows when I was on the hill. I was like, hey.
Love it.
That's great.
Oh my gosh. But Ashley, you know how you said you weren't sure which direction Danny was going? This is my life. Like, I'm sitting here, I need one of those kill switches, because I never quite know, but
I don't know how to speak. I know how to say. I don't even know where I'm going sometimes, but that's super important, because I go to people's houses that are really strong anti-gun, and I'll pick up guns from their house that they don't like, and they'll sit there while they got their CNN volume up as loud as it can go, and they just argue with it. I mean, they just tell me what's wrong with having guns. They tell me, and I can't even speak to them because they're not going to hear me. But then you get the other people, my dad had these guns and I don't like guns, and we have conversations about it. And then, I did that with one guy that was totally anti-gun. He sold all of his guns to me, and we had a really long conversation after it was over, a healthy conversation. A week later, he called me back, said, could I have one of the guns back? And I gave him the gun back.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
that's a win. Where if I would have just been arguing with him, I wouldn't have gotten nowhere with the guy.
Yeah.
So,
For sure. Yeah. Again, so many times in this conversation, the title that we've chosen, Correcting the Language, has come into play, and just correcting our way of interacting with people, so that we can not only give but receive, ideas and that sort of thing, is the only way we're ever going to move any ideas forward. And so I think you showed such a fine example of how to do that in a respectful and a professional way. You always do, but I get to see what you do so much more often than maybe just everybody else, because we are friends, and because I do follow the work you do on the TV shows you've been on, and other things. You've helped us with the DC project in the past. I don't know if you're still technically a DC project delegate, because with all the other hats you wear.
I know. I wasn't ejected out of the Facebook group, so I guess
just everything.
I keep trying to draw you in closer, and you're
I
like,
know.
And
I really, obviously, Di helped me out. I think I am still a delegate, because Di sent me a thing
There you
from
go.
the DC
Diana
project.
Muller. Yeah.
So I am. And you're right. I really need to get more engaged and involved with it. It's just been with the pandemic and a couple of health issues I had in the fall. Like, it's just been a crazy year since I moved to Arizona. So yes, I am still involved, and I will hope to be more involved in the future.
Absolutely. And even that is, that shows you that the DC project is a nonpartisan. It's hard to keep it nonpartisan, just like we were saying with you. That's a hard space to live in when there are, so many rhetorical uh, fiery things out there in conversation that cause you to sort of be like an us versus them. And it's like, no, we have to constantly remember that the Second Amendment is part of our Constitution, which is in our Bill of Rights, which is in our Constitution, and it's for everybody. And so you're, again, a great example of what we can all strive to be better at. Before I let you go, what other projects are you currently working on?
Oh, Lord. Couple of expert witness cases that I can't speak publicly on, but I mean, the one I can speak publicly on is the assault weapons ban case, which is currently in the hands of Benitez. And we did all of our hearings and depositions and everything. So, couple of expert witness testimonies, writing for recoil still. I returned to the Sam Russell Museum in Montana, and I'm redoing their Browning exhibition as their curator. A lot of stuff at the Mob Museum. Oh, so so many random things. I feel like I'm just happy that the museum world came back strong, because that was a big part of my consulting business that kind of died off last year with the pandemic. And then, of course, if you like random history speak, you can always check out our podcast, Danny and my podcast, Danny from the Cody Museum, not this Danny, podcast, History Unloaded. We just took a little bit of a break because we'd kind of been doing it every week for a year and figured people could take a break from our voices. But I'm going to be in Wyoming filming the whole next season, so it'll come out sometime this summer. So definitely check that out.
Absolutely. That is so cool. And I should remember the name of it. The reality show that you were on where you were one of the judges of
Oh,
people.
Master of Arms. That's on Discovery Plus, I just found out. So if you want to check it out, you can see it on Discovery Plus.
That was so fun. And I thought that that show was going to help in that idea of like renormalizing for people that own firearms and bladed instruments and tools, knives and swords, that sort of thing. Uh, it used to be every house had multiples of those things and it wasn't weird. And somehow we've gotten to this space where somehow it's a little bit weird to have guns for some reason. And then to have this show, it can only help to help people realize there's so much technology that is inherent in just even the development, and you've done a good job with that at the Cody Museum when you went through the renovation of showing how the artwork of it and the technology of it all just kind of culminates and comes together, and it's not just about the the tool that some people think are only used for evil. So it's wonderful.
Well, thank you. It's been a ride.
Yes,
That's
absolutely.
an understatement, but I love it. It's different things every day.
You're so versatile and you're so good at so many things. I love that you have an opportunity to showcase so many of your gifts and talents. But all right, so as we go out, how do people follow you and all of your adventures?
You can follow me on Instagram at History and Heels. That's the platform I use the most. I'm at official Ashley Hlebinsky on Facebook. If you just search my name, you'll get my private account. Please stop following that. I don't post anything. And if you want to see more of Marley's antics, although you'll see him on my page, he's at Marley in the Museum on Instagram. And I provide a perspective. I take pictures of him at historic sites that I'm working for and provide a little bit more generic history. So gun history, my page, generic history on Marley's page.
So fun. I love it. Well, thank you so much for all that you do. And we will have to get together for some Mexican food and margaritas again soon.
Ashley, thank you for being here, and tell Mark congratulations for us.
I will.
We miss him. We'll see you later. Thank
All
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
That's a busy girl.
That is a busy girl. And honestly, she is such a good spokesperson because she is able to articulate things so well and avoid the landmines that too many of us, including myself, will accidentally step on, right?
Yeah.
And so
That's all I do.
yeah, for sure. But we absolutely have got to have Mark Hainish on. I'm making note right now because that is huge.
Oh, you bet it. Why isn't that all over the world news?
That's massive news. But I always enjoy talking to Ashley. I learned so
Yeah.
much from her. And if you have never been to the Cody Firearms Museum in Wyoming, especially in the summer, like here in Arizona, where it's so hot, it's
Oh,
so
it's so
hot.
beautiful up there.
In Arizona, you can go to Wyoming and it is much
And
less
it's like 3
hot.
museums in one, too.
7.
7.
I think there's 7 museums all put together on that complex.
Yeah.
It's fantastic, and the renovation is brilliant.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hands-on, a lot of educational opportunities. They even have the mural of the Time magazine cover. 2018, 2019, I think. I can't remember the year.
A few years ago.
Time magazine did an entire, there's, I'm going to say it wrong, 120 people on the cover, pro and anti rights, pro and anti-gun people. And then the entire article, will kind of take you into who the person is on the cover,
Mhm.
And why they believe what they believe.
It's
And
weird. You just said anti-rights. Who would be
I
for
know,
anti-rights?
I know, it's
Who?
crazy.
Only people in power would be for anti-rights.
It doesn't make any sense to me, but there are people out there like that. But so anyway, yeah, that
Yeah.
mural is there, and it's wonderful because we walk along and it's like, oh my gosh, there's Maj Touré, he's on there, and
A lot
Gina
of people that we know
Roberts,
were on there.
and
Yeah.
a lot of people that we know. So Kevin Dixie
Yeah, and they have
is
firearms
on
there
there.
too.
At the Cody Firearms
Yes.
Museum. Yes,
Yeah.
they do. Yes, they
Some
do.
cool stuff.
All right, we are going to wrap up and get on out of here. Thank you so much to Ashley Hlebinsky. Awesome, awesome, Ashley Hlebinsky. Thank you to all of our listeners all over the world. We value you. Your time is your most finite and precious commodity. And when you spend it with us, that's everything, because
Yeah.
we know you could be anywhere doing anything. And then you take these topics that our subject matter experts talk about and you bring them into your private conversations with your sphere of influence.
Your kids, your family, your friends, and you do it in a non-argumentative way, and everybody gets along, and people get the little seeds, and they start thinking instead of following what's going on in the news today.
So true. Well
Thinking.
said.
Let's think about stuff instead of following.
Yeah, or just reacting.
Yeah.
I was reacting.
Right. Challenge.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that's it. That's all I've got.
I think it's
except
time to pray for our nation.
Yes,
Actually,
absolutely.
it was time before this.
It's always time for that.
Yes, there's always a time to pray for our nation.
Pray
And
for our representatives and our leaders.
I don't like leaders. Representatives, yeah.
And how about those ones that we get frustrated with?
You know,
or we
I was
don't
thinking
really
about
like?
that. And one that
like
needs a lot of
Blumenthal,
prayers right now.
I mean, what she just said, he really went out of his way to be
Right.
gracious.
One that we really need to pray a lot for right now, and I just realized it, is Biden.
Yes.
He needs prayers.
He does.
He really does.
Even though some of us are really unhappy and frustrated with his performance so far.
Right.
He needs.
But he's a human being. He
we
needs
should
prayers.
pray for him.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Pray for wisdom.
Yeah. So especially the ones that aren't our favorites.
Just so everybody knows, I didn't vote for him, but I pray for him.
Absolutely.
Just,
for sure.
just want you to know that, make it clear.
All right, guys. Until next time, be good to each other. Have a great week.
Bye-bye.
And God bless. Bye-bye.